G'day guys, how's it going? In this video, we're going to look at another loop construct called the while loop. So up to this point, we've just been using the loop keyword, and we've had to get out of loops by basically doing a check at the bottom here and then breaking out, okay? We've done some other things, but essentially this is the bit that breaks out of the loop if the code doesn't process anything, right? So we want to implement the same thing with a while loop. Now with a while loop, it looks like so. So if I type the word while, and then I have some condition here, so we'll just put while true for the moment. And then basically what goes inside the code block will continue as long as this is evaluated to true, okay? Now this is different to this one down here. This will break out when this condition is true, but this condition is true only when the index has gotten to the very end. This will only execute the code if this is true. This is to get out of the loop if it's true. Slightly different, right? So what we need to do is we need to take this condition here and then we need to reverse it, right? So at the moment, player score index is 0, right? Player score count is going to be the count of these items, right? So technically the score index will never be higher than the count until we get into the loop, right? So what we need to do is we need to say, okay, instead, check for the opposite, which is we want to continuously run this loop until this index, while this index is less than the count. So as soon as this index is incremented to the count, then basically we will no longer run any code inside this loop, right? So let's just quickly finish this off by going player scores index plus equals 1 to increment that counter. And then just for the moment, I'm going to get rid of this loop code at the bottom and just comment it out and just make sure we're getting to the bottom here, right? So what will happen is we'll say highest score is -1 for now. All right, so let's just quickly run and check that. And it gives us a warning because we haven't actually assigned the value, but that's fine. But ultimately, we see highest score is -1. So it is leaving this loop appropriately, which is good. All right. Now, all we really need to do is grab the logic that we had from before and place that just before that increment. So I'll just uncomment this. And we have the player score that we need to bring in. That comes from this line of code here. If we save that and we now run this, right? Now we can see the highest score is 97, which was the very last result. If I change this just to make sure that it's working, I change that to 43, right? And I run. Well, we can see the highest score is now 95, which is actually this record. Cool. So it is working now as intended. But just remember, the issue or the thing here is that this while loop will never execute if this is false, right? So if we say for a second the default size is 0, therefore player score index is not going to be less than 0, this code won't execute at all, okay? So let's just quickly check that and run. And now we can see highest score is -1. Why? Because that's what the default for this value was, okay? But this condition will never actually execute and get into this block because of the fact that the player scores count is 0, and so is the index, and 0 is not less than 0, so therefore this code doesn't execute. Whereas with a conventional loop, right, if I take this code out, like so, and save, you're going to have a different problem. So let's just put this back in, save, and when I run, it's going to say high score is 30, right? Because it's detected that player score index is now 1, which is higher than the count, so it breaks on the very first iteration. So it actually at least gets in once. That's the distinction here. This one got in 0 times. This one at least executed once. Okay, now you could try and get the same result as the while loop by putting this at the very top and do that, but then the code below it will just terminate and never actually be reached. right? And it'll just spread out -1, okay? So there's just a couple of things to be mindful of. So let me just revert all that back. We'll take out this code and then put this back to the way it was just to make sure that it's still working. Run it one more time. And there's our 97. Cool. So that is how we make a very simple while loop. Now, we can do the same thing in terms of having nested while loops that we did with the nested loop keyword. And to do that, we essentially use the same strategy that we did before, right? We go break, and then we provide a label. So I could go break outer, for example, right? And then I can set this with an outer here. And I forget, I don't need the colon there, my bad. So now that I've done that, and I need to put a quote before that, my bad. So now if I run this, well, you're going to get a similar, like a do while attempt here, right? Where it's detected the first time the highest score was higher than, the first time the player score was higher than the highest score, considering the highest score was -1, it goes, okay, sign it, but then just break out immediately, right? And leave the while loop altogether. So basically it iterates once and that's it. But I just wanted to show you that you can still do this the same as we could with a loop. Cool. So that's it for this video. And basically, I'll see you all in the next one.